Hey guys, Dr. Justin Marcagiani here. We're going to be chatting about how to reset your circadian rhythm. I get these questions all the time from patients. I'm staying up too late. I can't get to bed on time. I'm sleeping in too late. I can't get up early with the sun. What do I do? How do I reset my circadian rhythm? We're going to dive into that. Before we do, please smash that like button. Helps the search algorithm. And put your comments down below. Really curious to know your thoughts on the topic. So first off, we have this natural phenomenon known as our circadian rhythm that is primarily driven by light and dark cycles. So the sun coming up in the morning naturally stimulates cortisol awakening response. So you typically have this cortisol that increases in the morning time, and then you have this cortisol awakening response where you have this 50% jump in cortisol, typically from when you wake up in about 30 minutes or so. So you get this big jump of cortisol. And then from there, your cortisol will then, after that first hour of waking, that awakening response, that first hour, it tends to just slowly taper down throughout the day. Now, that cortisol is really important because it gets you mobilized. It mobilizes glucose so you can burn that for fuel. It is a stress hormone, so it gets you engaged. It gets your frontal cortex alert, so you're ready to start your day. It's very important. Now, when you're chronically stressed and you have HPA axis stress, that's hypothalamic-pituitary, that's your kind of brain feedback loop. That's the master thermostat of your brain to talk to the rest of your body. It's a feedback loop. And so when we have lots of stress output, the gland then produces hormones that help deal with that stress, whether it's adrenaline, whether it's cortisol, whether it's sex hormones. It's there to help kind of recover, deal with that stress. And then ideally, as that stress comes down emotionally, you provide feedback loops back up, and that's going to help control that stress response. The problem is when we're chronically stressed, that feedback loop can get disrupted. So we typically have like CRH, so that's corticotropic releasing hormone from the hypothalamus, that goes to ACTH from the pituitary, and that talks to the adrenals to make cortisol. You also have in the medulla of the adrenals, you have adrenaline that also stimulates cortisol production as well. And then dopamine is a neurotransmitter that also stimulates that hypothalamus to make that CRH, which then tells the pituitary to make ACTH. So dopamine plays a big role, and dopamine helps with focus. When dopamine's low, it's going to cause sweet cravings. It's going to cause inability to focus. You may feel depressed too. Dopamine is that kind of I love you neurotransmitter. And every time you get a like on your Facebook post, you get a little dopamine hit, right? And so dopamine is really important. The more chronically stressed you get, that's going to take your dopamine, and your body will tend to allocate dopamine towards adrenaline, which is a stress neurotransmitter. Adrenaline is basically the same thing. Adrenaline, catecholamines, epinephrine, norepinephrine, they're always kind of, it's in the same camp, like three words to describe almost the same thing. And so when you're chronically stressed, that's going to be a big deal. You're going to deplete that. And with women, it's really important because dopamine is a tonic inhibitor of prolactin. So think of dopamine as the brake of prolactin. So the more stressed you get, right, the more your dopamine drops, right, the more you take your foot off that prolactin brake. So you have dopamine, keeps the prolactin down. As you get stressed and your dopamine drops, that foot on the prolactin brake comes up, and then prolactin starts to increase. And prolactin can throw off a woman's cycle. And so you can start to see cycle dysregulation with prolactin. That's a big deal. See, prolactin can also go awry with like high levels of insulin and testosterone and androgens. That's a big deal too. So how do you reset your circadian rhythm? So a couple of things is just force yourself to sleep with the sun. When you get up is when you should, when the sun comes up. When you go to bed should be when the sun goes down. That's a pretty good rule of thumb. Now, the first couple of days it's going to be hard. So what I typically recommend out of the gate is a cold shower. Tends to really stimulate the hypothalamus-pituitary-adrenal axis. So cold shower. You can start with a hot shower for a minute or two and then gently turn it down, and make that last 30 seconds to a minute cold shower. That's very helpful. Second thing is you can have a little bit of caffeine to start the day because that's going to stimulate that cortisol a little bit. You can even use things like adaptogens, like adrenal glandular licorice, B vitamins, and like especially B5 and B6. And that can be very helpful, very stimulating. And you can do that. And then you can try to get some sunlight at the same time. You can even try to do some grounding too, because that kind of dispels a lot of those positive neurons, positive electrons, and that kind of can dispel it into the ground. And that's very helpful. So just getting that exposure to sunlight, trying to get to bed on time. And some people, depending on how wound up or how sensitive their nervous system is, You need to be more careful with light. You may have to have a dimmer switch, get your light down about 80%. You can get some blue blocking glasses, or you can get, if you wear glasses, I wear glasses at night when I watch TV or relax. So I have like a blue blocking lens in there, and that's super helpful as well. So blocking out the blue light can be good. You can also get like true dark like glasses that block out sunlight too. We'll put some links down below to some recommended products. That can be super helpful. Other things that you can do at bedtime, you can do like an Epsom salt foot bath. That's excellent. You can get some good Epsom salts, take a cup of it, put it in some hot water in a foot basin, just cover enough so your ankles are covered, and you can absorb a lot of transdermal magnesium sulfate, and that passes right into the bloodstream. That can be very relaxing, very sedating. Other things I'll add in at nighttime will be like GABA and L-theanine, very calming. I'll use ashwagandha throughout the day. It's a powerful kind of HPA axis kind of resetter. That can be really helpful. A lot of times we'll test hormones. So we'll look at the circadian rhythm. If the rhythm's like way off, like it's low where it should be high or it's high where it should be low, there's different nutrients we can give to kind of help kind of get that rhythm reset. We may use like things like 5-HTP and B6 to increase serotonin levels, which then that 5-HTP can cross the blood-brain barrier, and that 5-HTP can convert to serotonin and melatonin in the brain. That can be very, very helpful for sleep. And then we can use things like tyrosine in the morning to increase dopamine, to increase adrenaline, which can be very, very helpful at kind of restarting cortisol production and getting your neurotransmitters active, getting that HPA axis more active in the morning time. And then at nighttime, calm down with the 5-HTP and B6. There's even protocols where you can take, it's called like a melatonin reset, where you could take a milligram of melatonin every single hour on the hour for like a day or two straight. I've seen that. Not something I do a lot because I just think melatonin should be made more at night, because melatonin and cortisol have an inverse relationship. As cortisol drops at night, melatonin goes up. So I'm not a fan of taking melatonin where cortisol should be high, but I've heard that and seen that to be clinically a viable option. It's like a tool in my tool belt, right? You kind of, over decade plus doing this, you kind of develop tools. You look at what has worked for patients. You talk to other clinicians and what's worked for them in certain situations, and you kind of just store them in your back pocket when needed. And so those can be really good. Red light therapy is excellent during the day. It charges up the mitochondria. I think that's really good. Obviously, getting sunlight's going to be good too. Red light's a different frequency. It's in the mid 630 to 680 frequency. You don't burn, but it really supercharges the mitochondria. I like that a lot as well. But getting a good cortisol rhythm adrenal test can be super helpful to see where you're at. If your thyroid's off or you have undiagnosed Hashimoto's issues, there could be problems there. If you're chronically inflamed, that inflammation can overly stimulate the adrenals throughout the day, and that can also cause circadian rhythm issues. If we have chronic inflammation in the gut, that can be a hidden source of inflammation in the adrenals too. So you really want to look deep within. I'm just kind of giving you some broad strokes to look at and some simple strategies that you can do. Light and dark, really mitigating that. Room darkening shades, keep your phone off or at least airplane mode across the room, have white noise machine, have real good air quality, at least a good HEPA charcoal filter in your room to really keep the air super clean. Make sure you have either white noise or an air filter on, so any creaking in the house, it's not going to wake you. Making sure you keep fluids down within an hour or so before bed so you're not waking up because you have to pee. These are all good, simple strategies that you can work on here. Let me see if I have any questions here where I can dive in. Okay. My dietitian said eggs contain no nutrients except protein. Oh, that is absolutely nonsense. That is just total BS. I mean, eggs contain lutein, which is incredibly good for the eyes. It contains fat-soluble vitamin A and B12. I mean, that's just ridiculous. That's someone that doesn't know what they're talking about. Conventional dietitians just, they basically get an education in how to create meal plans for hospitals. It's very much industry driven by the food pyramid, by special interest. Just go to a dietitian conference and you'll just see like sponsored by Snickers, sponsored by Mars, sponsored by, Cargill, like whatever the big food company is, it's clear that's what they're sponsored by. Don't electrons have a negative charge? Yeah. No, I think it's I forget. In general, I think you're getting access to negative charge when you ground. You're dispelling, you're putting off positive into the ground, and you're getting negative back. Pretty sure that's kind of the general consensus on that. Okay, very good. Magnolia bark, yeah, that's a good adaptogen that you can use to kind of help the HPA axis. That's really good as well. Oh, cold shower before bed has also been helpful too. I've seen cold showers in the morning and also cold showers. I do a cold shower every morning. If you're really having issues at night, typically that Epsom salt foot bath and a cold shower can be excellent. I also like Tulsi tea, which is a holy basil tea. Get the decaf version. I like that as well. Yeah, and I've seen things like passion flower work really well, California poppy, valerian, lemon balm. These are all very calming and soothing herbs to kind of help wind down. That's really good. Let's see here. Yeah, eggs are like taking a multivitamin. Absolutely. I mean, like I had Joel Salatin on my podcast a year or two ago, and he talked about his eggs being like pasture fed. They sent conventional eggs to a lab and then his eggs. And I think he said the B12 in his eggs were 20 times higher than the conventional eggs. So it does matter. Yeah, you're welcome, Sam. Appreciate it. Thanks, Dennis. Really appreciate it as well. Yeah, I mean, it's just crazy. You look at certain foods, right? You look at, what was it? It was one of these nutrient food calculators that had come out at the end of last year. And I think they took some cereal, like it was either Lucky Charms or Cheerios or Fruit Loops, and they compared that to a steak. And they said, hey, this Lucky Charms had more nutrient levels than eggs or steak, which is just crazy. It's just nuts. And if you look at these nutrient calculators, what they typically do is they penalize saturated fat because conventional medicine hasn't really come up to speed with saturated fat actually being incredibly powerful. All the old data on saturated fat, they lumped it in with trans fat. They never separated it out. Now the new meta-analysis over the last decade have shown there's no correlation with animal saturated fat and heart disease. And so they just penalize saturated fat, and they give a lot of like extra kudos or bonus points to like, little bioflavonoids, like little polyphenols and things like that. And they don't really give credence to like fat soluble vitamin A. They kind of just assume like, oh yeah, your plant soluble, your plant beta carotene is like the equivalent to vitamin A. Well, a lot of people don't really, make that or convert it, or they'll just think like, oh yeah, my flaxseed is the same as like my EPA and my fish oil. It's like, well, not necessarily. Like you realize that maybe only 10% of that's converted. And so they kind of just make a lot of assumptions that these nutrients get converted like they should. They also make a lot of assumptions that the anti-nutrients and lectins and things that make it harder to digest and break down are just not there, right? That digestibility is 100%. And they ignore a lot of the fat-soluble compounds because fat's bad, right? Therefore, fat-soluble vitamins will also kind of get negated as well. So again, this is Dr. J here. Hope you guys enjoyed today's video. If you did, there'll be a link down below if you want to reach out. Myself, I'm available worldwide for functional medicine support. My staff is happy to help you out. There'll be a link down below to get my coordinates. Happy to help and make sure you guys stay on track. Hope you enjoyed it. If you did, comment below, thumbs up, and share.